Alright, so let's take a look at graphing sine function. I've got 4 different examples I'm going to do, and you might want to watch the whole video because it's all of them's different, and it's pretty much going to cover everything that you'll come across when you're graphing sine. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do when we're graphing the sine function is we want to set up our interval that we want to graph it over. So here sine x goes from 0 to 2 pi. The period of sine is 2 pi. So this would be one period here. And I'm going to show you how to find the beginning and ending point of the period when we do the examples. And then what we want to do is we want to take this interval here, this 0 to 2 pi, and we want to split it up into 4 equal intervals. So we take the starting value and the ending value and we find the midpoint, which is pi, and then we find the midpoint of this value and this value, which is 3 pi over 2, and then we find the midpoint of this value and this value, which is pi over 2. Alright, and I'm going to show you how to do all that when we do the examples. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So let's look at the first example. We want to graph this over one period. Alright, so to find our intervals, there's a couple of ways to do it. You know, for instance, on this one you could find the period using the 2 pi over b. But the way that we're going to find the interval that we're graphing it over, it's gonna work on every single problem that we do. So what we do is we take whatever we're taking the sine of, in this case 2x, we want to put it between 0 and 2 pi. So we set this inequality up, 0 to 2 pi. Now the 0 and the 2 pi, it's going to be the same every time. That's what you do every single time. And then this is what you're taking the sine of. Alright, so now we solve for x. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. So I get 0 less than or equal to x less than or equal to pi. So this is what we're graphing it over. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw our xy axis, and we'll label it 0 to pi. Okay, you mark off your starting and ending value for your interval. Now we need the largest and smallest value. Well, you get that from the number that's in front of sine. See, in this case, it's 1. So the largest value is 1, the smallest value is negative 1. Okay. Alright, now let's break this up into 4 equal intervals. So I need the midpoint of 0 and pi. So to do that, all you do is you add whatever you're looking for the midpoint between, you just add them up. So that's 0 plus pi, which is pi, and then you can multiply that by 1/2, or divide by 2 is the same thing. I'm just multiplying by 1/2 for when we get fractions. Okay, so pi times 1/2 is pi over 2. So that's pi over 2. Now I need the midpoint here. So I have 0 plus pi over 2 is pi over 2. And then I take the pi over 2 and I multiply it by 1/2, which equals pi over 4. So this would be pi over 4. And then I need this midpoint. So that's pi over 2 plus pi. Add them up. That's going to give me 3 pi over 2. And then 3 pi over 2 I multiply by 1/2, which is 3 pi over 4. Okay. Alright, so now I've got it set up. Now, look at this. Alright, so you see our main function here, y equals sine x. Now, one thing you need to notice here is, here's the interval that we're graphing it over. Okay, and we just found it in the problem we're working. Alright, the thing you need to remember about sine is the very first point in the interval starts at 0. The next point goes to its maximum. The next point goes to 0. And then the next point goes to its minimum. And then the next point, or the last point, goes back to 0. And that's what you got to remember. Once you find these values like we just did, this is what it's always going to be. 0, max, 0, min, 0. Okay. All right. Now, let's go back to our problem. All right. So, here's where the interval starts. See, we're going from 0 to pi. So remember, sine starts at 0. Then it goes to its maximum, 0. And then it goes to its minimum, and then back to 0. And then we can draw the graph in. Okay. And that would be our graph. Alright, let's take a look at another one. Alright, so how about this one? Okay, well, remember I told you, whatever you're taking the sine of, you want to put that between 0 and 2 pi and solve for x. So I'm going to add pi over 3 to everything. And so that's going to give us pi over 3 less than or equal to x less than or equal to, and that will be 7 pi over 3. Okay. Now let's draw our xy, and it's starting at pi over 3 and going to 7 pi over 3. And then my max and min value, well, the number in front is 1, so that's going to be 1 and -1. Alright, so now let's find our let's break this up into 4 intervals. So let's find our midpoint here. So I need the midpoint between pi over 3 and 7 pi over 3. So I have pi over 3 plus 7 pi over 3 is 8 pi over 3. And then I take the 8 pi over 3, multiply by a half. See, the 8 and 2 will cancel, and I'll be left with 4 pi over 3. So that's 4 pi over 3. Now I need the midpoint here between pi over 3 and 4 pi over 3. So pi over 3 plus 4 pi over 3 equals 5 pi over 3. And so 5 pi over 3 times 1/2, that's going to be 5 pi over 6. And so this midpoint is 5 pi over 6. And then I need the midpoint here between 4 pi over 3 and 7 pi over 3. So 4 pi over 3 plus 7 pi over 3 is 11 pi over 3. And then 11 pi over 3 times 1/2 is 11 pi over 6. Okay. Alright, so we're graphing the sine function. So remember, sine, it starts out at its minimum. It starts out at 0. So where are we starting? We're going from pi over 3 to 7 pi over 3. So it starts out at pi over 3. At pi over 3 it starts out at 0, and then the next point, where does it go? It's maximum, and then back to 0, and then it's minimum, and then back to 0. And then we can sketch our graph in. Okay. Alright, so we've got 2 more we're going to do. So let's take a look at this one. So here we've got y equals -2 sine 3x plus pi. So once again, 0 less than or equal to 3x plus pi less than or equal to 2 pi. Alright, so now I'm going to subtract pi. And so that's going to give me -pi less than or equal to 3x less than or equal to pi. And then I'll divide everything by 3. And And so that's going to give me negative pi over 3 less than or equal to x less than or equal to pi over 3. Alright, so let's mark this off. So I've got negative pi over 3 and pi over 3. Alright, so this one's pretty obvious to see what the midpoint is. It would be what? 0. But let's go ahead and work it out. So find the midpoint here. So that's going to be negative pi over 3 plus pi over 3 equals 0, and then 0 times a half is 0. So there's the midpoint, 0, and that's where our y-axis would be. Okay. Alright, and then our amplitude is what? 2, so we know our max and min value is going to be 2 and negative 2. Alright, so now let's find the midpoint here. So that would be negative pi over 3 plus 0, which is negative pi over 3, and negative pi over 3 times a half is negative pi over 6. So this would be negative pi over 6, and then here when you add these, that's going to be pi over 3. Pi over 3 times a half is pi over 6. Okay. Alright, so here's where we're starting, and here's where we're ending. Okay. Now, here we have a negative 2 in front. Okay. Well, sine starts out at 0. Okay, so that's fine there. Let's start out at 0, and then it goes to its maximum. Okay, it goes to its maximum. But notice we have the negative in front. So instead of going to its maximum, since it's a negative, it's going to go to its minimum. Okay, and then it goes back to 0. And then remember, sine's supposed to go to its minimum, but since it's a negative, it's going to be its maximum and then back to 0. And so when we draw our graph in, it's going to look something like that. Okay, and let me say this: you can graph it over another period. The way that you would do that, I'm just doing it over one period, but graphing it over 2 periods would be the same. Well, to do that, you would need to get the length of this period. You would need to know how far it is between here and here, and all you would do is you would take this value minus this value, the end value minus the starting value, which this would be pi over 3 minus negative pi over 3, which that would be 2 pi over 3. That's the length of the period. Okay, so all you would do is, I mean, you could come out this way or you could go the other way. I don't have any more room here, but all you would do is if you extended this on out, you would just mark off a 2 pi over 3 here. So what you would do there is you would do negative pi over 3, and then you would subtract 2 pi over 3, and that would give you negative pi over 3, which would be negative pi, and that value there would be negative pi, and then when you would just break it up again. Okay, and then the same thing here. If you wanted to go the other way, well, you would just take pi over 3 and add the 2 pi over 3, the length of the period. You would add that and you would get pi. So you would mark off pi and then break that up into 4 equal intervals. Okay, so that's how you could do it over 2 periods. Alright, so let's do one more. Alright, so let's see, I've got well, first let me talk about this one a little bit. Here we have this minus 1 out here. Well, for right now, okay, we're not even going to worry about the negative 1. All we're going to do is focus on this part. That's all we're going to care about right now. Alright, so remember, what I'm taking the sign of, I'm going to put between 0 and 2 pi. Alright. And then we just solve for x. So I'll subtract pi over 6. And so that's going to give me negative pi over 6 less than or equal to 2x less than or equal to, and that will be 11 pi over 6. And then I got to get rid of the 2, so I can either divide by 2 or do what? Multiply everything by a half. That'll cancel that 2 out. So that's going to be negative pi over 12 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 11 pi over 12. All right. So there's our starting value and our ending value. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this up here so I can rewrite this up here, so give me some more room to down here to find my midpoints. Okay. Alright, so this is going to be negative pi over 12 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 11 pi over 12. Alright, so let's erase that. Alright, that gives me a little more room. Alright, so now let's go ahead and draw our x-axis. And so I have negative pi over 12 and I have 11 pi over 12. I don't think the pi's gone off the screen. Hopefully you can see it, and that's 11 pi over 12 there. Alright, so now I need the midpoint. Okay, notice I haven't drawn my y-axis in because I don't know exactly where it's going to go. I mean, is it here, where's it going to go? Probably right in here somewhere. But let's go ahead and find our midpoints first. So let's find the midpoints here. And so that's going to be negative pi over 12 plus 11 pi over 12. That's going to be 10 pi over 12. And then I take the 10 pi over 12, multiply by a half, and that's going to give me 5 pi over 12. So this would be 5 pi over 12. And then I'm going to add these up. Okay, so let's see, negative pi over 12 plus 5 pi over 12 is 4 pi over 12, and 4 pi over 12 is just pi over 3. And then I multiply that times a half, which that's just pi over 6. So there we have pi over 6. And so it looks like our y-axis is going to be right around in there. Okay, right in there. That's where 0 will be. Alright, then what about this one? This is 5 pi over 12 plus 11 pi over 12. That's 16 pi over 12. And 16 pi over 12, that would be 4 pi over 3. 4 pi over 3. Multiply that times a half, and that would be 2 pi over 3. So this would give us 2 pi over 3. Alright, so hopefully I didn't make a mistake on those two, doing them in my head. Alright, so now let's mark off. We've got a 2 in front. Remember, we're not worrying about the negative 1 yet. So we've got the 2 in front. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright. Now, let's see what we've got here. Alright, so remember, sine starts out at 0. Okay? It starts out at 0. But what's happening? We're subtracting 1. So yes, this right here, it starts at 0, and then we have to subtract the 1, so that's going to be at minus 1. And then the next value, it goes to its maximum. Okay, in this case, its maximum would be what? 2. See that? 1, 2. But we're subtracting 1. So 2 minus 1 is 1. And then it goes back to 0, but we're subtracting 1. So it would be down here at negative 1. And then it goes to what? Its minimum. its minimum would be here at -2, but we're subtracting 1, so -2 minus 1 is -3. See, it's down here at -3, and that would be a 1. And then it goes back to 0, but minus 1, that's going to be at -1. Okay, and so we draw our graph, and there it is. So basically what it did is it took this graph here and it shifted it down 1 unit. Okay, alright, so yeah, this was a long video, but it pretty much covers, everything that you'll come across. So hope it helped. And if you liked the video, I've got other videos, you can watch those and subscribe. Alright, thanks.